Women have had a difficult time when it comes to equality. Women received one of their first equal rights with the 19th Amendment. When discussing women's rights, these questions arise. How did women work together to ratify the 19th Amendment? What were some early attempts that women made to gain equal rights? How did women's ideals about equal rights change over time? Women's right to vote was not achieved when men and women made the first effort to gain these rights. It took over 71 years from the first national effort regarding equal rights before an amendment was ratified for women's rights. After the 19th Amendment was ratified, many people realized that the amendment does not guarantee equal rights for all genders, only the right to vote. Men and women still fight almost 100 years later for full equality, using events such as the Women's March in 2017 to help spread the message. One of the first major attempts for women's rights in America began in 1848 at the Seneca Falls Convention. This was the first national attempt to discuss women's rights, and is often called the Seneca Falls Convention because of where it took place. It started when Lucretia Mott and Elizabeth Cady Stanton put out ads for a convention in Seneca Falls, New York, at the Wesleyan Chapel. The convention proposed 12 solutions to create equal rights. One of those solutions included the right to vote. 68 women and 32 men signed a declaration of sentiments that listed these grievances and solutions. After reports of the convention came out, many people reacted negatively, and some of the people who participated were even threatened. However, people were not discouraged from fighting for equal rights. In 1869, Elizabeth Stanton and Susan B. Anthony created the National Women's Suffrage Association, also known as the NWSA. Around the same time, Lucy Stone and Henry Blackwell created their own group called the American Women's Suffrage Association, the AWSA. These groups were created due to differences in the beliefs about women's rights. Around this time, the 15th Amendment was being created, and the men and women who were in the NWSA wanted women's rights to be included in the 15th Amendment. However, AWSA did not want women's rights to be included because they believed it may cause the 15th Amendment to not be passed. Instead, the AWSA wanted women to have a separate amendment. After the 15th Amendment was passed, without women's rights included, both the NWSA and the AWSA petitioned for a separate amendment that included equal rights for all genders. When brought before the Senate in 1886, the plans were eventually rejected. Feminism, the push for women's rights and equality, and peaceful protesting began to help women get ratification of the 19th Amendment. Long before the 19th Amendment, Wyoming was one of the first states to allow women to vote in December 10th of 1869. There was a 6-to-1 ratio of men to women, and they thought allowing women to have voting rights would attract more women to the state. Reasons Governor John A. Campbell approved of the law was for free national publicity, and the state wanted a more even woman-to-man ratio. Also, legislator William Bright's wife convinced him that denying women the right to vote was injustice. From 1913 to 1920, separate states began to endorse women's voting rights. In 1920, Texas became the 36th state to ratify, allowing the two-thirds majority rule for the 19th Amendment. In 1920, women had the right to vote, and everywhere women rejoiced. When women were granted the right to vote in the 1920 election, 8 million more people voted, mostly women. The change from the election of 1960 to 1920 was that in 1916, most states were Democratic, whereas in 1920, most states were Republican. This was a major milestone in the fight for equality. However, in 1921, when President Harding met with the National Women's Party, he promised that he would join them in the fight for women's equality, but President Harding never followed through with his promise.
In 1922, after the 19th Amendment passed, 2 women registered to vote, and Judge Oscar Lesser had their names removed from the voting rolls due to the fact that in Maryland only men could vote. He believed the bill had to be approved by the state. In Lesser v. Garnett, the Supreme Court found Lesser was wrong because it was granted by the Constitution of the United States. Because of this case, even if a state says otherwise, it was certain women were allowed to vote.
After the amendment was passed, League of Women Voters presented the Equal Rights Amendment in 1923, which would ban gender-based discrimination, but it did not pass. In the 1950s, women started pushing for equal rights in the workplace. Also, women started pursuing higher education. 29% of the workplace were women.
In many other countries, women hold higher positions than women do in America. For example, the English Prime Minister is Theresa May. While other countries have broken through the glass ceiling, America has failed to do so. In the most recent presidential election, Hillary Clinton became the first female to win a major running position. Although she was not elected president, she has opened doors for women to one day reach higher political positions.
Another right that men and women have fought for is equal pay. As of 2015, women on average earn about 80 cents for every $1 that men make. Studies have determined that women may not achieve equal pay until as late as 2059.
A recent event created to represent equal rights was the Women's March, a march that took place on January 21st of 2017. Men and women marched across the country, and some even joined in around the world, to make it clear they would not stand for any of the rights that they had gained to be taken away. Many also marched for specific reasons, such as supporting extra paid family leave and an equal rights amendment. Between 3 million and 5 million people attended the Women's March, making it one of the largest demonstrations in American history.
The 19th Amendment took years to actually become ratified, with many failed attempts taking place beforehand. With time, women have been able to achieve equal voting rights and will continue to stand in the fight together until men and women share the same rights in every aspect. Equal rights have still not been achieved, and people continue to fight and break through barriers that have never been broken before.